Hey there, Planeswalkers, welcome back to Top Down Commander. Today, we're all on coronavirus quarantine across the country, so I thought I'd bring you the ultimate self-isolation deck tech. Kick off your shoes, and let's head into the Deck Dojo. Hello, Planeswalkers, welcome back to the Top Down Commander Deck Dojo. I'm your sensei, the Magus of the Salt himself. It has been quite a minute, hasn't it? I hope everybody's doing great and taking care of themselves in this crazy time right now. I'm sorry for falling off the face of the earth. Just been dealing with some mental health issues that I'll dive into maybe in a separate video. But I just wanted to say I'm back, and now that we're all on quarantine/lockdown across the country, I'm going to dive full steam into creating fun, interesting deck techs for all three of you who care. Given the state of the world today, I thought it'd be fitting to do a deck tech over what I'm dubbing the ultimate self-isolation deck tech. Today we're going to be covering Karona False God and her Skipping Turns deck. Karona False God is a creature avatar for 1 white, blue, black, red, and green. She has haste, and at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player untaps Karona False God and gains control of it. Whenever Karona attacks, creatures of the type of your choice get +3/+3 until end of turn. So the goal of today's deck is going to be to set up negative effects that occur on each player's upkeep, then break the symmetry by quarantining ourselves and skipping all of our turns. We start off this deck tech by stockpiling our toilet paper, ramp and card draw. We start off with Soul Ring and Wayfarer's Bauble as our artifact ramp. Next up, there's Farseek, Rampant Growth, and Cultivate, which are all going to go and get basic lands and put them onto the field. Then we've got Sylvan Scrying, Expedition Map, and the current bane of commander tables everywhere, Golos Tireless Pilgrim. All of these can go and fetch us non-basic lands, and there's a couple we're really interested in getting, but we'll see that later. As far as card draw goes, we're running a ton of enchantments, so we've got an Enchantress package, starting off with Verduran Enchantress, Argothian Enchantress, and Satyr Enchanter. And then there's Eidolon of Blossoms and Enchantress's Presence, all of which are going to draw us a card either when an enchantment enters the battlefield or when we cast one. While our commander, the Karona False God virus, can be deadly, we want to make sure we're taking all precautions, washing our hands, and making sure this virus is only going to affect our opponents. For that, we've got the entire Vow cycle, which are all enchantment auras that we can enchant Karona with, that provide it with some benefit, with the caveat that it can't attack us or planeswalkers we control. Vow of Wildness gives +3/+3 in Trample, Flight gives +2/+2 in Flying, Malice gives +2/+2 in Intimidate, Duty gives +2/+2 in Vigilance, and Lightning gives +2/+2 in First Strike. Slap these on Karona, and we are virtually safe from her virus. Lastly in this category, we're also running Assault Suit, which is 4 mana for an artifact equipment that says, equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has haste, can't attack you or a planeswalker you control, and can't be sacrificed. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, you may have that player gain control of equipped creature until end of turn. If you do, untap it. Equip 3. This is a great way to just double down on Karona not being able to swing at us, and it's just a nice little bit of redundancy since you're already going to be giving Karona to everyone else at the table. Now, just in case we're not feeling safe enough, it's time to lock our doors and keep visitors out. We're going to start off with Ghostly Prison, Propaganda, and Koskin Falls, which are all going to make our opponents pay 2 for each creature that attacks us. Sphere of Safety makes it so we can't be attacked unless our opponents pay 1 for each enchantment we control, and Crawl Space will make it so we can only be attacked with no more than 2 creatures each combat anyway. In case this isn't enough of a deterrent, we've got Fate Spinner, Pramikon Sky Rampart, and Mystic Barrier. Fate Spinner says at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player chooses Draw Step, Main Phase, or Combat Phase. The player skips each instance of the chosen step or phase this turn. When Pramikon Sky Rampart enters the battlefield, we can choose left or right, and players can only attack in the chosen direction. Mystic Barrier offers the same choice, except we can change it on our upkeep. With both Pramikon and Mystic Barrier out, we can choose both directions to shut off attackers in general. Finally, we've got the ultimate cards for self-isolation in Teferi's Protection and Solitary Confinement. Teferi's Protection is 2 and a white for an instant that says until your next turn, your life total can't change and you have protection from everything. All permanents you control phase out. Exile Teferi's Protection. And then finally, we've got 2 and a white for Solitary Confinement, which is an enchantment that says, at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Solitary Confinement unless you discard a card from your hand. Skip your draw step. You can't be the target of spells or abilities. Prevent all damage that would be done to you. Good news is, once we start skipping our turns, it doesn't matter that we have to discard on our upkeep to keep Solitary Confinement, because we're just never going to have an upkeep again. Now that we've quarantined ourselves, let's watch carefully from the safety of our own home as the plague hits our opponents. We start off our each upkeep tour with Primal Order, Ancient Runes, and Karma. Primal Order is going to ping our opponents for each non-basic land they control, Ancient Runes is going to hit them for each artifact they control, and Karma will hit them for each swamp they control. Karma will be important when we get to the land base. Hint hint, there's an Urborg. Bottomless Pit, Gibbering Descent, and Dreamborn Muse are going to deny our opponents of cards in hand or cards in their library. Forsaken Wastes, Sulfuric Vortex, and Havoc Festival are going to provide constant damage or loss of life on each upkeep. Doom Foretold, Mogus, God of the Slaughter, and Magus of the Abyss are all going to help deny our opponents of any creatures on the board to keep them from spreading the virus back to us. Quicksilver Fountain will eventually make all lands into islands. We're all washing our hands so much and so frequently that we're guaranteed to have a flood sooner or later. Finally, we've got Sizon, Perverter of Truth. Sizon is going to punish our opponents by having them draw more cards and take 2 damage at the beginning of their upkeep. Continuing along the theme with Sizon, Perverter of Truth, we've got a sub-theme of each upkeep. We're going to punish our opponents for drawing cards, which usually happens at least once a turn, so I feel like it counts. First up, there's Fate Unraveler and Underworld Dreams, which are going to ping our opponents for 1 every time they draw a card. Next up are Nekuzar the Mind Razor and Spiteful Visions, which both let each player draw an additional card, but also deal damage to our opponents each time they draw a card. And finally, there's Fevered Visions that will let everyone draw an additional card on their end step, but then it'll deal 2 to each opponent who has 4 or more cards in hand. Alright, next up, we're going to make sure that we're staying nice and healthy during all of this, keeping that white blood cell count high, so we're going to have some cards that generate us tokens at the beginning of each upkeep. We start off with Verdant Force and Tendershoot Dryad, who are going to create a Saproling token each upkeep. Tendershoot Dryad also has Ascend, which says if we have at least 10 or more permanents, we get the City's Blessing, and when we have the City's Blessing, Tendershoot Dryad is going to give +2/+2 to each of our Saprolings. Then there's Dragon Broodmother and Ophiomancer. Dragon Broodmother makes a 1/1 red and green dragon token with Devour 2 each upkeep, and Ophiomancer is going to make a 1/1 Death Touch snake each upkeep, as long as we don't have any other snakes. Finally, in the token slot, some of us turn to prayer at a time like this, and if we're lucky, we might just get some Divine Visitation. Divine Visitation is an enchantment that is going to turn all of the tokens being made into 4/4 angels instead of saprolings, snakes, or dragons, just in case we need to get in with some beatdown. Or it synergizes nicely with Ophiomancer, turning each of those snakes into angels, and therefore continuing to make another angel every turn because we don't have any snakes. And just in case you need a little more spirituality, there's Perforos, God of the Forge, who's going to deal 2 damage to each opponent whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control. So we're taking our necessary precautions, we're encouraging the virus to stay away, but lastly, we've got to remember to self-isolate. To do that, we're just going to skip our own turn and stay 6 feet away from the table. We start our turn-skipping jamboree with Chronotog and Chronotog Totem. Chronotog is a 1/2 creature ATOG for 1 and a blue that says, skip your next turn. Chronotog gets +3/+3 until end of turn. Use this ability only once each turn. Chronotog Totem is 3 mana for an artifact that says, tap, add blue to your mana pool. For 1 and a blue, Chronotog Totem becomes a 1/2 blue ATOG artifact creature until end of turn. And for 0, Chronotog Totem gets +3/+3 until end of turn. You skip your next turn. Play this ability only once each turn, and only if Chronotog Totem is a creature. Next up, we've got Chrono Savant, Eater of Days, and Meditate. Chrono Savant is a 5/5 creature giant for 5 and a white. For 1 and a white, you can return Chrono Savant from your graveyard to play tapped, skip your next turn. Eater of Days is 4 mana for a 9/8 artifact creature Leviathan with flying and trample, but when Eater of Days comes into play, you skip your next 2 turns. And then Meditate, 2 and a blue for an instant that says skip your next turn, draw 4 cards. Our last turn-skipping card turns out to be Sensei's top pick of the deck, and that is, drumroll please, Lethal Vapors. 2 and 2 black for an enchantment that says, whenever a creature comes into play, destroy it. But for 0, destroy Lethal Vapors, you skip your next turn. Any player may play this ability. The beauty about Lethal Vapors is that we can activate that ability as many times as we want. Let's skip 150 turns. Boom, done. We're going to stay quarantined as long as we need to until this all blows over. In the strategy section, we'll go over when and why we might want to skip 1,000,000 turns. But first, let's move on to the last couple of sections. Next up, we've got a couple of enchantment tutors, an Enlightened and Idyllic tutor. We're also running Plea for Guidance, which can fetch up 2 enchantments. There are a couple of important lands to go over real quick in the land section. Those are Glacial Chasm, Magosi the Waterveil, and Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. Glacial Chasm has a cumulative upkeep of 2 life, and when it comes into play, sacrifice a land. You cannot attack. All damage dealt to you is reduced to 0. Magosi the Waterveil enters the battlefield tapped, can tap to add a blue to your mana pool. For blue and tap, you put an Eon counter on Magosi the Waterveil and skip your next turn. Remove an Eon counter from Magosi the Waterveil and tap it, and return it to its owner's hand to take an extra turn after this one. We're not really concerned with taking an extra turn. We mainly just want to use Magosi as redundancy for skipping our own turn. And then lastly, Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth makes each land a swamp in addition to its other land types. So how exactly does skipping all these turns help us win the game? For that, let's check out Sensei's signature strikes. So the ultimate plan of this deck is to set up some sort of negative effect, like a sulfuric vortex, and then place a solitary confinement on board. With those out, we tutor up Lethal Vapors, skip 1,000 turns, and our opponents hopefully die to the vortex without ever being able to damage us in any way. We've also got some backup plans. In Perforos and any of our token generators, we can use them to ping our opponents to death that way. Our Nekyazar effects can kill them as they draw each turn and draw additional cards, take a bunch of damage, skip all of our turns together. We don't lose anything, they draw their whole deck, they ping themselves to death with those effects. Urborg and Karma can deal tons of damage each turn to our opponents, as they're going to lose life equal to the number of lands they control each upkeep. Another cool interaction is Quicksilver Fountain, which is going to make all of their lands into islands, but because we're skipping our turn, we're never going to turn into islands, and Quicksilver Fountain is never going to go away. So we could effectively shut an opponent who's not playing blue completely out of ever playing the game again. And then worst case scenario, if none of these situations ever come to pass, maybe we can beat people to death. We've got Karona. We're going to put the vows on her and make her really big and scary, or we're going to make 1,000,000 tokens with all of our each upkeep token generators, so maybe we can beat them to death that way. And that's the deck. Thanks for stopping by and checking it out. If you like what you saw, remember to hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. Feel free to leave a comment down below or find me on Twitter at Magus of the Salt. But most importantly of all, stay safe out there, everybody. I know this is a scary time for everybody, so let's not be shitty to each other. And until next time, keep kicking ass.